I'm lucky enough to get to do my own slides. Thank you, Esther. I must have done something right leading up to this event. So I'm going to talk more specific. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Vivian Tseng. I'm Vice President of Programs at the William T. Grant Foundation. I'm going to shift a little bit from Aaron's comments and talk more specifically about partnerships between researchers and practitioners. If any of you listen to NPR, you might have heard our tagline. Our mission is supporting research to improve the lives of young people. And more specifically, we think the way we do that is we try to support research that can inform policy and practice. And so over the last few years, we have focused on trying to understand the use of research evidence in policy and practice. And that has led us to a particular interest in long-term partnerships between researchers and practitioners. When I'm talking about research practice partnerships, I have a particular kind of collaboration in mind. And here I'm really thinking about long-term collaborations between researchers and practitioners. And I really want to emphasize that long-term piece because it departs from the ways researchers and practitioners often work together. Maybe a researcher has a study they want to do, maybe they've just gotten a grant and they go search of a place to do the work. And then when that work is over, they may move on, right? Or maybe a district or a school has a distinct piece of work that they want done, and they go out and they consult or contract with a researcher to do it. And there are a lot of these one-off projects that are way too dominant in our field. And we think about partnerships as these long-term commitments to a joint agenda where there's some agreement about what researchers and practitioners are going to work on together in the long term so that folks could learn as they go. So how did we get here? So this is how I visualize the gap between research and practice. I'm sure this is a metaphor many of you have heard people talk about before, and I think it's a very real gap. There are differences in the sort of day-to-day incentives, the demands, the organizational cultures, the professional norms that drive our work in the research side and on the practice side. And because of some of those differences, you hear also a lot of discontent that has been expressed on both sides, sort of yelling across the fence at the other. You know, researchers will say, well, we know all these things, why aren't they just being used, right? And why are they misusing research evidence, the things that we know? And on the practice side, you'll hear people say, but you know, if the research was just relevant to our needs, maybe we would use it. If it wasn't squirreled away in some journal that I can't even pay to access, there's not enough money to pay to access, then maybe I would use it, right? So there's a lot of discontent that's been expressed back and forth. You know, some of it more true than others. But I think that discontent is not a bad thing because discontent often gets us to think more innovatively about how are we going to address some of those problems. And I would say that we have been working quite hard on trying to build some of those bridges. I would argue, though, that the way we've tried to build those bridges have been maybe not quite the right way to frame it. I think we focus way too much, oh no, okay, on building one-way streets, these bridges that are one-way streets. This is where people talk about research to practice. The problem is we just need to move research to practice. And that way of framing the problem has led us to work on certain types of strategies for building these bridges. As researchers, we focus a lot on rigor, because that's what matters to us. If research is going to be used, it should be rigorous. We focused a lot on dissemination strategies. How do you push the research out more effectively? And then I think that policymakers, especially federal policymakers, have focused a lot on incentives. I would say incentives or even carrots and sticks as a way of getting research out. I would argue that when we think about bridges, we should think much more about building two-way streets. That it's not just about pushing research out to practice, but we should make sure that practice priorities, practice concerns are also driving research agendas, that things are coming in both directions. And if we do that, I think if we reframe the problem, we're going to start producing more research that's useful and used. So not just relevant to researchers as we sit around thinking, what do teachers need? But really working with teachers and figuring out from their own perspectives, what kind of research needs do they have? I think we're going to focus more on engagement strategies, this back and forth interaction, not just pushing research out. And 3, capacity. What does it take for researchers to produce more useful research evidence that meets practice needs? What does it take for practitioners to really be able to drill down, make sense of research evidence, and learn from it as they go along? I have so many more slides, but I'm already out of time.